Good morning. Welcome to today's Conservation, Research, and Biotechnology Subcommittee hearing. Today we'll be examining Farm Bill conservation programs and hearing from a distinguished panel of witnesses for their perspectives. Title II of the Farm Bill authorizes a suite of conservation programs that are critical for supporting the long-term viability of farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. These programs have the dual benefit of supporting the producer and addressing pressing natural resource concerns at the local level. As we have today's discussion, hear about the programs, and discuss potential improvements, it's important that we have some context for why and how our system of farm conservation developed over many years. The roots of our conservation system date back to the 1930s and the actions that the federal government took in response to the Dust Bowl. In the 19th century, the Homestead Act was enacted with the best of intentions, but it had unintended consequences. When settlers came west in search of fertile land to farm, it didn't take long for them to realize that the sandy soils in the southern Great Plains were susceptible to erosion when unprotected, or not protected, I should say, by native vegetation. Coupled with severe drought conditions, this led to massive dust storms in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas in the 1930s. Perhaps the worst fell on April 14, 1935, a day that has become known as Black Sunday. The dust storms were so severe, their effects were felt far beyond the southern Great Plains, gathering attention of lawmakers in Washington. Only 13 days after Black Sunday, President Roosevelt signed legislation into law establishing the then named Soil Conservation Service. Renamed the Natural Resources Conservation Service in 1996, the agency administers most of the Farm Bill conservation programs and provides technical assistance for others administered by the Farm Service Agency. Voluntary conservation practices are critically important for supporting agriculture and ensuring we don't have another Dust Bowl again. With this year marking the 90th anniversary of both Black Sunday and the establishment of the now named NRCS, today's hearing is timely to hear more about these programs and how Congress may be able to further improve them. We are currently in the second extension of the 2018 Farm Bill, and rural America badly needs legislation to reflect the current status of agriculture and the rural economy. This extends to conservation programs and reforms we can include to build on the progress we've made in recent farm bills. Last year's committee-passed Farm Bill proposed historic new funding for conservation programs by rescinding the unobligated Inflation Reduction Act funding and reinvesting it in Title II. The House-passed reconciliation bill similarly reinvests the unobligated IRA funding into the conservation title. Reallocating those dollars would increase the title's baseline over the long term, making it a permanent investment in conservation programs. It also allows for continued support for orphan programs, increased funding for successful programs like Small Watershed Program, and the creation of new forestry easement program. In addition to funding, last year's bill placed an emphasis on science, technology, and innovation. The bill makes precision agriculture specifically eligible for cost share under EQIP and CSP, requires more frequent updates to conservation practice standards, and creates an Office of Innovation at the Office of the Secretary. The bill streamlines RCPP, provides common sense flexibility for ACEP, and reforms the Technical Service Provider Program. The bill also proposes a modernization of CRP and focusing the program on marginal lands by incorporating soil capacity class into rental rates for general enrollment. These are all welcome changes intended to improve program administration and make them more producer-friendly. Farm Bill conservation programs have been so successful because they are voluntary, incentive-based, and producer-first. The programs have also been so effective because they are locally led, which allows for states and regions to determine the priority natural resource concerns. As we think about the next Farm Bill, it's important for us to keep all of this in mind. Conservation programs have been so effective because the flexibility built into them and because we have continually encouraged the local-led process to work. I'm proud of the work that this committee has done over the past several Farm Bill cycles to improve the programs because we know voluntary conservation works. I'd like to welcome all of our witnesses today and thank Ranking Member Takota for her partnership on this hearing. And with that, I yield to the Ranking Member for any opening remarks that she would like to provide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being at our convening today. As Ranking Member, I'm proud to join you and our colleagues in reaffirming a shared commitment to supporting America's farmers, ranchers, and producers through smart, effective conservation policy. I also want to thank our panel of witnesses for being here today and extend an especially warm mahalo to Nicole Galase for traveling all the way, I think she came the farthest, all the way from Hawaii to share the perspective of food producers operating in some of the most remote and climate vulnerable parts of the country. Now, let's begin with some common ground. USDA conservation programs work, whether it's EQIP, CSP, ACEP, RCPP, the whole alphabet soup of acronyms. These programs provide practical tools to improve soil health, manage water more efficiently, and keep operations productive and resilient. But here's the hard truth. The weather isn't what it used to be, no matter what you want to call it. Climate change, extreme weather, shifting seasons. Our producers are living it every day. Longer droughts, harder rains, heat waves in April, frost in May. It's getting harder to grow the food, fuel, and fiber that this country relies on. And that's not a partisan talking point. It's reality for farmers and ranchers across this country. Programs like EQIP and CSIP can help producers adapt, but they've been chronically underfunded for decades, turning away thousands of qualified farmers each year, not because the programs don't work, but because demand far exceeds supply. That's why the Inflation Reduction Act was such a turning point. The conservation investments in the IRA weren't just a budget line, they were a statement. A bold, time-limited, once-in-a-generation effort to meet demand head-on and finally give producers the access and the technical support they need to take on the challenges they're facing today. Now, yes, we've seen bills that move IRA dollars into the baseline USDA conservation budget, and that is a good thing. And on the surface, that might look like a step towards stability, but let's not lose sight of what made the IRA conservation funding different and powerful. The IRA wasn't about business as usual. It was about breaking the logjam. It opened the floodgates to let more farmers and more ranchers get the support they've been asking for many, many years. And let me be clear, this is not about left or right, it's about forward. Whether you're in red states, blue states, purple states, or farm country right in between, producers are not asking for politics. They're asking for access, for flexibility, for conservation tools that make their land more resilient, their water more efficient, and their operations more secure, because their livelihoods, as you all know, depend on it, and so does our nation's food supply. So as we move forward, whether a farm bill or broader conservation planning, let's protect not just the dollars, but the spirit behind what was in the IRA. Urgency, scale, and the recognition that changing conditions require bold action, not modest tweaks. So let's make sure that in the name of stability, we don't slip back into scarcity. Our producers don't need diluted promises. They need real, timely, farmer-focused support because the weather's not waiting, and neither should we. I look forward to our dialogue today and to working with this committee to continue improving the effectiveness of NRCS programs, supporting our staff, and supporting Americans' agriculture through thoughtful and innovative conservation practices. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to hearing from our panel, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee for any opening comments he would like to make. Mr. Thompson, Chairman Thompson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I know it's not easy making the trip to Washington. I really appreciate your willingness to participate in today's hearing. Also want to thank Mr. Lucas for serving as the subcommittee chairman at this critical time. There's no member more capable to help navigate the vital issues of working lands conservation at this moment in time than our esteemed former full committee chair. So thank you, Frank. As a former chairman of this subcommittee, I've been proud to support these programs, and I've seen firsthand how voluntary conservation directly benefits the producer, soil and water, wildlife habitat, and so much more. Title II programs have been so successful for many reasons, fundamentally because our model of conservation is voluntary, incentive-based, and locally led. The locally led part is important, and we must continue to protect that aspect of the programs as we consider reforms within a new Farm Bill. The Farm Food and National Security Act was passed by this committee last year and contains many bipartisan priorities in its conservation title to build on the gains that we've made in recent farm bills. This includes reforms to improve the administration of RCPP, ACP, and the Small Watershed Program. The bill encourages more innovation in the programs by requiring more frequent updates to conservation practice standards and makes precision agriculture eligible for cost share in EQIP and CSP. It also proposed a modernization of CRP and important improvements to the Technical Services Provider Program. And while these are just some of the reforms this committee can take to improve the administration of each program, we also have a tremendous opportunity this Congress to bolster conservation programs over the long term with significant new funding. The Farm Food and National Security Act also proposed rescinding the unobligated IRA conservation funding and reallocating it into Title II. House Republicans are now trying to provide similar reinvestment through the reconciliation process. Instead of letting the IRA funding expire, investing it would provide additional funding for the programs that we all know work and increase the baseline for the conservation title into perpetuity. Rural America continues to face great economic challenges, and I look forward to working with all of you on strategic investments and policy updates to meet the needs of our producers and the agricultural value chain. Thank you again to our witnesses for your time today, and we look forward to hearing your testimonies and appreciate your expertise with the Farm Bill conservation programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Craig, for any opening comments that she'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so pleased to be here with fellow strong advocates for conservation programs. Thank you to each of our witnesses for making time to come up to the Hill today, share your expertise with us, and a special shout out to Ms. Gulasi, who has traveled 5,000 miles to be with us here today. Our farmers are the natural caretakers and stewards of our land. USDA's conservation programs help continue that legacy while diversifying farm income streams and helping farmers' bottom line. Conservation is essential to keeping our farm and forest lands working for generations to come. Over the last decade, my state, Minnesota, has received over $875 million from Natural Resources Conservation Service Programs to help producers with everything from planting cover crops and pollinator habitat to implementing reduced tillage and manure management. For example, in my district in Rice County, conservation champions like John and Debbie Becker have enrolled land in the Conservation Reserve Program to protect the country's only self-sustaining trout stream, and more recently, they've used the Environmental Quality Incentives Program to fund planting cover crops. Of course, that's the counties only, not the countries only. And though the Conservation Stewardship Program, Mike and Kay Pedersen have added critical area plantings of native prairie on highly erodible end rows where erosion occurred year after year. These programs are popular because they work. Moving forward, there are some significant issues I believe we must address to get more conservation on the ground. First, I would be remiss not to mention my significant concern with the current administration's hollowing out of NRCS. In Minnesota alone, we've lost more than 70 dedicated NRCS employees. Without dedicated and qualified staff working from farmer service centers in rural America, these programs cannot succeed. Yet the President's budget recommends completely zeroing out conservation technical assistance, further jeopardizing our ability to implement extremely popular Farm Bill conservation programs like EQIP and CSP. This will hurt farmers, not help them. Second, NRCS programs remain oversubscribed. We've got to protect the remaining Inflation Reduction Act conservation funding by rolling it into the Farm Bill baseline. and we should do it in a manner that preserves the original intent of the investment and without busting up the Farm Bill coalition. We must make sure that money stays in the voluntary, incentive-based conservation programs that our farmers rely on. The investments we made in conservation programs through the IRA might be a once-in-a-lifetime, and we shouldn't give up those gains. I'm glad the majority has recognized the importance and success of the IRA and joined us in trying to get this across the finish line. Lastly, it's been too long since we've reauthorized a full 5-year Farm Bill. There are common sense, bipartisan changes that everyone agrees need to be made. I look forward to working with my colleagues, our witnesses, and the broader conservation community to protect and improve the Farm Bill's conservation programs. We have a tremendous opportunity to streamline program delivery, increase incentives for producer participation, and preserve farm, ranch, and forest lands for current farmers and our children, and especially for those of us who have them, our grandchildren. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so that the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there's ample time for questions. Our first witness today is Mr. Russell Bonning, President of the Texas Farm Bureau. Our next witness is Christopher McClellan, the Managing Director of the Agricultural Programs at Ducks Unlimited. Our third witness today is Dr. Dan Siebert, who's Senior Advisor and former Executive Director of the National Watersheds Coalition. Our next witness is Mr. Tim Fink, the Policy Director at the American Farmland Trust. And I'll turn to my colleague to introduce her constituent, my fellow cattleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And our fifth and final, last but not least witness today is Ms. Nicole Galassi, the Executive Director of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Association. Mahalo, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today, and we now proceed with their testimony. You'll each have 5 minutes. The timer's in front of you. It will count down to 0, at which time your time will expire. And with that, Mr. Bonning, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Takeda, and members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and testify today. My name is Russell Bonning. I'm a 4th-generation farmer and president of the Texas Farm Bureau. Along with my brother, we produce grain, cotton, and wheat while operating a 450-cow dairy and a beef operation outside of Polk, Texas, which is right southeast of San Antonio. It's an honor to be here on behalf of our member families of the Texas Farm Bureau. Voluntary conservation practices have become a cornerstone of modern agriculture. Our family implements conservation practices to improve water quality, soil health, and wildlife habitat while keeping our land productive. But we are not unique. Farmers across Texas and across this whole country are seizing the opportunity to utilize conservation programs. For decades, USDA, NRCS, and FSA programs have assisted farmers in executing on-farm conservation practices. Farmers rely on working lands programs such as EQIP, CSP, and RCPP. These programs are highly successful, and the greatest challenge for producers is just gaining entry. All of these programs have become increasingly oversubscribed, with demand consistently surpassing available funding. For Texans, EQIP is of the utmost importance given the 50% set aside for livestock operations. In 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act allocated additional funding for these working lands programs. Currently, this IRA funding is temporary and does not alter the permanent baseline funding established by the 2018 Farm Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act that's passed the House last month infuses roughly $11 billion in unspent RA funding into this baseline for these programs, while also adding $8 billion in additional baseline funding. Incorporating the IRA funds into the baseline would ensure that these funds continue into perpetuity and farmers can stay committed to their conservation work. CRP is a voluntary land retirement program that assists farmers in removing environmentally sensitive land from ag production. For many farmers, CRP serves as an important farm safety net by providing a reliable source of income during times when crop prices are low or when certain acres are less productive due to environmental challenges. By enrolling vulnerable or less profitable land in CRP, farmers can receive a guaranteed annual rental that helps stabilize their cash flow, thereby reducing financial stress and risk. We support the approach taken in the committee's bill that proposes using soil classification to determine CRP payments. This approach could better align rental rates with the productivity and environmental value of the land enrolled. By factoring in soil classification, payments could be more accurately tailored to reflect the potential ag value and conservation benefits of specific parcels. It would create a payment scale that incentivizes the enrollment of environmentally sensitive areas, which focuses on the parcels of land that the program was originally designed to protect. Farmers often express concern about the shortage of technical service providers available to assist with these conservation practices, as this lack of support can delay or limit their ability to implement these programs. Without sufficient TSPs, producers may struggle to develop conservation plans, complete necessary documentation, or receive expert guidance on selecting the effective practices tailored for their land. This shortage can be especially challenging in rural or underserved areas where access to trained professionals is already limited. Expanding and better supporting the network of TSPs is essential to ensure farmers can successfully navigate conservation programs and achieve meaningful environmental outcomes. Congress must invest in the TSPs that assist farmers in executing these practices. We strongly advocate that the committee work to make all conservation programs more practical, accessible, and supportive of modern agricultural challenges. Our members continue to advocate for increased funding and higher payment rates to better reflect the true cost of implementing and maintaining conservation practices. Also, simplifying application processes and reducing paperwork are top priorities, especially for small and beginning farmers who may lack the time or resources to navigate these complex requirements. Farmers seek more flexibility in program contracts and practice options to tailor the their conservation efforts to their unique operations. We ask members of this subcommittee to work towards reauthorizing the Farm Bill to ensure that farmers have access to conservation programs that promote environmental stewardship. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Boehning. Mr. McClellan, please begin when you are ready.
Well, good morning, Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Takuda, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for holding this hearing and for the opportunity to testify on the importance of voluntary, locally led, incentive-based Farm Bill conservation programs. My name's Chris McClellan. I'm the Managing Director of Agriculture Programs for Ducks Unlimited in the Great Lakes Atlantic region, and I'm also a producer myself, supporting a small cow-calf operation in my home state of Missouri. It's an honor to be here this morning. As a proud partner of USDA, Ducks Unlimited has a long history of working with farmers, ranchers, and other private landowners across the country to restore and enhance millions of acres of waterfowl habitat. Ducks Unlimited supports balanced agricultural policies that help American farmers and ranchers be more competitive and successful in meeting the demands for food, fiber, and energy while conserving soil, water, wetlands, grasslands, and forests. DU's focus is not just on the financial assistance dollars delivered to agricultural producers and land stewards, but also the critical importance of conservation technical assistance, where partners such as Ducks Unlimited work alongside USDA and participating landowners to help them achieve their conservation goals. We're proud of our ability to deliver quality, science-based assistance with agricultural producers alongside NRCS. The federal flagship Wetlands Restoration Program, ASEP, Wetlands Reserve Easement, or WRE, is a voluntary, non-regulatory, incentive-based way for private landowners, farmers, and ranchers to protect and restore wetlands on their property. WRE also provides landowners a financially viable alternative for transitioning farmland with high inputs and low profits to functioning wetlands while continuing to focus investments and production on more suitable lands. And I've personally witnessed these benefits and the positive impacts WRE has to these program participants. NRCS also works with landowners to implement conservation practices on older WREs, allowing these lands to continue to provide ecosystem services for wildlife and people. One of DU's biggest priorities in the next Farm Bill is to ensure NRCS provides landowners with long-term stewardship opportunities. it is critically important that the program provide these additional tools to landowners to maintain their WRE and retain the associated wildlife benefits. Mr. Lucas, as you know, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which was originally authorized while you were chair of the committee, has been a resounding success. The rice industry's symbiotic relationship with waterfowl led DU to a historic partnership with USA Rice. This partnership has had phenomenal success in delivering on-the-ground conservation to rice farmers with more than 800,000 acres of rice impacted and over $100 million of additional conservation funding directed to these program participants. And while there still are administrative hurdles with the program, Ducks Unlimited asked Congress to provide thoughtful and targeted solutions that allow the program to continue to succeed. The Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, provides farmers and ranchers with additional financial options while improving soil health, enhancing water quality, and supporting wildlife habitat. And we do thank FSA and Administrator Beam for recently opening CRP general and continuous enrollments, and appreciate the committee's efforts in addressing policies last Congress that promote locally led activities and reinstate management tools and options such as mid-contract management, as well as increasing the rental rate payment practices under continuous CRP and state acres for wildlife enhancement. I've discussed our partnership with NRCS in providing conservation technical assistance when delivering these programs. This assistance, which is directly provided to the agricultural producers, is essential to the long-term success of a producer's conservation system. Conservation technical assistance is just as important as the financial assistance provided through the suite of Farm Bill programs. The priorities mentioned in my testimony were included in the Farm, Food, and National Security Act that passed out of the House Agricultural Committee last Congress, and I thank Chairman Thompson and the members of the committee for supporting Ducks Unlimited's priorities last Congress, and we ask you to continue to support those provisions in the upcoming Farm Bill. Ducks Unlimited proudly partners with NRCS and passionate farmers and ranchers and landowners who invest their own financial resources to bring these Farm Bill programs to their lands, and DU's mission to conserve, restore, and maintain wetlands and waterfowl habitat would not be possible without these voluntary programs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McClellan. Dr. Siebert, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Ranking Member Tokuda and members of the subcommittee, I'm Dan Siebert. I'm a charter member of the National Watershed Coalition. I also served the coalition as executive director for over 20 years. To begin, I want you to understand that the watershed program touches me on a personal level. I was raised on the banks of the Ouachita River, one of the original 11 upstream flood protection demonstration watersheds. I also witnessed the incremental improvements as one watershed dam after another was completed on those tributaries and creeks. Not huge, massive dams on the river, it was these smaller structures dotting the landscape, integrated into private farms and ranches that shaped my views and my passion for a lifetime of service and conservation. While USDA may be better known for providing a financial safety net for farmers and ranchers, the department also provides an actual safety net for rural communities. The watershed and flood prevention program is vital, but often overlooked infrastructure program in the NRCS portfolio. I consider Chairman Lucas as the godfather of the program, an heir to the legacy of watershed leadership shaped by his family and community stalwarts in rural western Oklahoma. The reason behind this is simple. Of the nearly 12,000 watershed structures nationwide, over 2,000 of them are in the state of Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, 71% of those nearly 12,000 dams are in the states represented here by this subcommittee's members. The Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Act authorizes NRCS to work with local sponsors to install watershed improvement projects. Projects provide flood prevention, water quality and quantity protection, agricultural water management, municipal water supply management, and wildlife habitat protection. The program has gained even more importance as a tool for helping farms, ranches, and rural communities adapt to increasing weather volatility and reducing risk against catastrophic weather events. The annual benefits these projects produce is over $2 billion. There are watershed project structures in 218 congressional districts across the nation. As a result, more than 48 million people across the United States benefit from the watershed program every year. A crucial part of the watershed program is the dam rehabilitation program. Many dams today are in a far different setting than when constructed. In addition, many of these structures built by NRCS had a design life of only 50 years. Since most of this construction occurred from the 1940s to the early 70s, many of these dams are now past their design life and they show the effects of aging. Mr. Lucas led the development of rehabilitation legislation in 2000 that ensured the nation's investment in the watershed program had the opportunity to continue into the future. Under this program, dams are selected for rehabilitation through analysis and a rigorous assessment process. I cannot overemphasize the importance of Congress and the USDA as full partners in the watershed program. We do think there are improvements to be made to the program. Our Farm Bill priorities are quite simple. Increase funding to the program, increase the flexibility of the program's authority to make repairs that go beyond routine operation and maintenance, which is required of the local sponsors, but falls short of the threshold for full rehabilitation. Provide flexibility in cost share to states, reduce the regulatory and administrative barriers that add years to project implementation, and add statutory language to provide oversight and accountability for program funds. The National Watershed Coalition is pleased to see its recommendations integrated into the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024. We cannot thank Chairman Thompson and Subcommittee Chair Lucas enough for their support of these policies, and we look forward to working with them and the other members to continue this work into the next Farm Bill. I will conclude where I began. The implementation and success of the watershed program shaped my life and the western Oklahoma communities that thrived under the umbrella of protection these structures provide. Similar stories can be found across the nation where, in a blend of federal, state, and local partnership, these projects have been successfully implemented. As we look to the challenges and the need for increased resiliency in our agricultural production and the communities which support it, the watershed program is more important today than ever in history.
Thank you for your career involvement in this, Dr. Siebert, and clearly it's a classic example. If you work long enough and hard enough, you can still do good things in this country. With that, I turn to Mr. Fink. Please begin when you're ready, sir.
Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Takuda, and honorable members of the committee. I'm Tim Fink, Vice President of Policy for American Farmland Trust, an organization founded 45 years ago to protect farmland, advance sound farming practices, and keep farmers on the land. I thank you for the opportunity to testify and applaud the committee for its continued work in strengthening our nation's voluntary Farm Bill conservation programs. While AFT is a broader Farm Bill platform, our testimony today will concentrate specifically on the agricultural land easement subprogram of the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. Farmland is too often viewed as an unlimited resource. But according to AFT research, in the first 15 years of this century, we've lost 2,000 acres a day. That means 11 million acres of farmland were paved over, built up, or converted to uses that otherwise threaten agriculture. This is the equivalent of all of the acreage in the U.S. devoted to fruit, nut, and vegetable production. AFT research projects that without further policy intervention, we're likely to lose 18 million more acres of agriculture to development by 2040, and many communities are already seeing this prediction being outpaced. Continued conversion of this finite resource threatens our food security, our national security, and the viability of our agricultural sector. Put simply, no farms, no food. It is also pushing production in the marginal lands and slamming the doors shut to the next generation of producers. Agricultural conservation easements are essential to stemming this tide. They offer landowners a vital option, a way to extract equity from the land without selling it for development, which is often the only option for a land-rich, cash-poor farmer when they reach retirement or face family or business expenses. Land under easement remains in private ownership and on the tax rolls, and it can be transferred to a new owner at any time with the easement conditions running with the land. Such easements benefit farmers, the farm, the community, and society as a whole. Here are 4 ways. First, easements support reinvestment in agriculture. Research shows that farmers and ranchers use easement proceeds to improve or diversify their operations, purchase new equipment, land, infrastructure. Second, easements support the transfer of agricultural land. The sale of an easement can help finance retirement without a farmer needing to give up their most cherished asset. For aspiring farmers, protected land is more affordable. In fact, it may be the only land they can afford. Third, easements spur additional conservation. A recent survey found that the majority of landowners with easements have NRCS conservation plans, and over 75% have adopted at least 3 conservation practices. This is because of something we refer to as permanent syndrome. Farmers are more likely to make these long-term investments if they know that the land is going to remain in agriculture long enough for those investments to bear fruit. Fourth, easements benefit rural communities and economies. A 2022 Montana study found that between 2014 and 2021, every ASIP dollar spent yielded nearly twice that amount in economic activity. These investments also supported over 1,000 local jobs. It is for these reasons that 30 states and over 100 local governments invest in easement programs. That list now includes the state of Tennessee. AFT was also pleased to see Secretary Rollins point to the benefits of ASIP-AL as part of the administration's Farmer First agenda. We are grateful to this committee, and especially to Chairman Thompson, for championing important easement reforms in the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024. I will highlight just a few. First, the bill would increase long-term funding for conservation programs by transferring unspent IRA conservation dollars into the Farm Bill, a measure also included in the recent reconciliation package. This is AFT's top Farm Bill priority, since it will enable more farmers to protect their land and implement the very practices they need to build more profitable operations for decades to come. Second, the bill would increase ASIP's general federal match and offer a lower match option for program partners. The increase in the match would enable more participation in the program in parts of the country where there are no matching funding to be found. The lower match option would provide an alternative for public programs that have had trouble reconciling their program rules with that of USDA. Third, the bill would streamline ASIP by empowering experienced certified entities to play a larger role. Certified entities help to reduce easement closing times and can do more to improve the experience for landowners. A greater focus on certification can reduce both costs and administrative burdens for USDA. And fourth, the bill eliminates ASIP-AL's adjusted gross income eligibility requirement. This change recognizes that an easement payment is different than a conservation cost share payment. This will also help reduce closing times and ensure that the program is focused on the lands most vital to conservation. I thank you again for being here and for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fink. And we now turn to Ms. Galassi. You may please begin when you're ready for 5 minutes.
Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Tokuda, and members of the committee, I'm grateful to join you today to testify on the value of conservation programs that support our nation's livestock industry. My name is Nicole Galassi, and I currently serve as the Managing Director for the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, a statewide organization supporting ranchers who steward 750,000 acres, or nearly 20% of Hawaii's total landmass. HCC is an affiliate of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, which is the nation's largest and oldest national trade association representing the U.S. cattle industry, and represents over 250,000 cattle producers. Cattle producers own and manage considerably more land than any other segment of U.S. agriculture, or any other U.S. industry for that matter. America's cattle producers collectively manage over 650 million acres, nearly 1/3 of our nation's continental landmass. Some of the biggest challenges and threats to our industry come from the loss or conversion of our natural resources. In Hawaii, like many other states, we face a decline in pasture lands. A decline in pasture inevitably leads to a decline in agricultural production, which weakens food security. Our goal is to keep grasslands green. Since our livelihood is made on the land, resource stewardship not only makes good environmental sense, it is economically fundamental. Maintaining robust voluntary conservation programs must remain a top priority for both USDA and this committee. Accomplishing this goal is impossible without the flexibility and attention to locally led decision-making. Cattle producers take pride in our efforts to improve the land and are always looking for partnership opportunities. I urge the committee to promote initiatives in the Farm Bill that allow NRCS programs to foster innovative and common sense land management. Additionally, mandates that stifle implementation or a one-size-fits-all approach simply does not work in the cattle industry. These efforts to standardize programs limit producers' ability to utilize the unique practices that help their individual operations thrive. The EQIP program is a popular funding source for Hawaii cattle producers. In one example, a Hawaii rancher utilized EQIP for cross-fencing to improve his rotational grazing, allowing him to double his herd size while improving soil health. For this producer and others, accessing technical assistance is crucial to success. NRCS staff provide guidance to maximize both productivity and sustainability. And access to EQIP and conservation technical assistance improves soil health, controls erosion, and ensures improved water quality. It's clear through my experience with NRC and FSA that lack of funding is not our primary roadblock. Especially when it comes to EQIP, the 50% livestock carve-out is effective in ensuring that necessary monies are available. Access to technical assistance and inefficient funding distribution are the most significant hurdles to producer success. While these hurdles were acknowledged in the 2018 Farm Bill, few policies actually increase functionality. NRCS was designed to function as a locally led federal agency. While this seems counterintuitive, its structure has proven invaluable for farmers and ranchers who seek specialized solutions for local conservation challenges. Local populations hold a deep understanding of their land, their ecosystems, and their unique challenges. These stakeholders know better than anyone else where to dedicate resources to address urgent and high-impact concerns. This insight allows conservation projects to be tailored to the specific needs of the area, reducing costly missteps often seen when national programs are forced on states or counties. In short, locally led conservation combines the right knowledge, community buy-in, and targeted solutions to efficiently stretch every dollar spent. As policymakers consider the sustainability of the U.S. agricultural industry, environmental sustainability is only one leg of a three-legged stool. Economic prosperity, social awareness, and voluntary conservation go hand in hand, and we're always looking for conservation opportunities that will have tangible benefits for the environment and to help improve our ranching lands. USDA's conservation programs are an asset to cattle producers, but only when implemented in a practical, producer-friendly, and voluntary manner. With USDA as a partner, American ranchers maintain open spaces, healthy rangelands, and wildlife habitat while leading the world in quality protein production. Together, we can conserve our country's natural resources, maintain economic prosperity, and ensure a viable way of life for future generations. I thank the committee for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to questions. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the witnesses for your testimony today. At this time, members will be recognized in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members, and in order of arrival for those who joined us after the hearing convened. And you'll be recognized for 5 minutes each to allow everyone to get as many questions in as possible. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Siebert, thank you for your testimony and your perspectives on Public Law 566. In your view, what do you think are the most helpful improvement that Congress could provide to the small watershed program and rehab program?
Mr. Chairman, I would direct you.
Your microphone, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Doctor.
I pulled a Jimmy there, sorry. I would direct you to our Farm Bill priorities that you are familiar with, not the least of which is the opportunity for NRCS to address remedial and repair work on aging structures that exceed the level for operation and maintenance for which the sponsors are responsible, but fall short of full rehabilitation. There's a body of work there that needs to be addressed, and it will require Congress pointing NRCS to that work for that to happen.
Last year's committee passed a Farm Bill contained provisions to specifically authorize cost share for remedial actions on PL 566. These actions would include the deterioration of a component of a structure faster than expected, or structural damage caused by weather or storm or weather event. So drilling in on this further, Dr. Siebert, in your view, how might such a change improve the administration of the program? We're getting down to the nuts and bolts here.
This body of work carries an element of risk, and the action that the policies that were put forth in that version of the Farm Bill would buy down that risk, which protects both the sponsors of the project as well as USDA and perhaps most importantly, those living downstream from this flood protection.
Just one more moment, Dr. Siebert. In the nature of the upstream flood control, remind our friends that these are smaller interlocking dams, most of which hold no water, simply catch and then meter out at a safe rate these rainfalls. Just the general concept.
Yes, these small watershed structures are built in a series. Many times the head of the watershed area will have 2, 3 of these structures on it that catch the rainfall, catch the water, and then release it over a period of 7 to 14 days rather than uncontrolled release from rain events in the upstream reaches of the watershed that send a flash flood or extensive flooding in the main tributaries.
President Baining, I appreciate your comments and your testimony about the need to simplify programs and reduce paperwork. In recent farm bills, particularly the 2014 Farm Bill, Congress was successful in program consolidation and simplification. Since Congress has at times tended to create similar or overlapping programs, sub-programs within larger programs, and regional carve-outs, it seems to me that such simplification must be necessary to restore clarity and update the statute. What are your thoughts about recent efforts in Congress to streamline and simplify programs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the short answer there is we're very appreciative of that. That's one of the things I kind of said in my testimony. What farmers and ranchers face, remember, we want to farm and ranch, and that's what we do. And when things can be simplified, when we walk into the USDA offices, it is much appreciated. So as we work through this, we appreciate keep that thought in mind.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe, having chaired this subcommittee some time ago, how far we've really come. The dramatic increases in the conservation spending in the 2002 program, and now this effort to take one-time money, what remains of it, and turn it into a permanent increase in baseline to work from. I think all of us in the conservation movement together, all of you and all of your supporters back home, we've had amazing success considering the ever-increasing challenges of legislating in the modern world. With that, I thank all of you for answering my questions and your participation in these programs, and I turn to my colleague, the distinguished ranking member from Hawaii, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2022, USDA launched the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities Program, or CSC, which provided funding and technical assistance directly to farmers to help them scale climate-friendly practices like cover cropping, tillage management, and prescribed grazing, to name a few. This program was overwhelmingly popular, and food producers across the country leveraged $3.1 billion in CSC funding to get shovels in the ground on cost-effective, partnership-based conservation projects. That was until April, when USDA abruptly canceled the program, claiming that CSC projects didn't prioritize direct payments to farmers. But in reality, farmers were receiving direct financial and technical support, often exceeding the arbitrary 65% threshold for direct payments, including in the administration's new Farmers First priorities. Now, more than 14,000 farmers covering 3.2 million acres across the country are left wondering what will happen to their planned conservation work, in some cases already investments made. There's nothing Farmer First about yanking the rug out from under these farmers, if you ask me. And the USDA, we know, has promised to replace CSC with the Advancing Markets for Producers Initiative, or AMP. But it's unclear when project reapplications will in fact be reviewed, how much funding will be available, and what farmers who are planning on this funding are supposed to do with the work that's already ongoing. Ms. Galassi, in your written testimony, you mentioned that you are eager to apply for AMP to continue projects started already and invested in under CSC, and you are currently in conversations with the USDA about this reapplication. What impact has frozen CSC funds had on planned conservation work and on your producers? What has been the impact on them, given many have already made investments in the ground?
Thank you for highlighting this issue. We did see the Climate Smart Commodities program as something that was going to help our producers. We had funds going directly to farmers, ranchers, and foresters. Because it was canceled, those projects are canceled as well. All those contracts were canceled, and if a producer is extremely fortunate, they're going to be continuing those projects on their own dime, but that was not planned for. And as you know, in agriculture, you need to plan for years ahead. We went through the hard work of getting them through the arduous onboarding process, and we had those funds on the ground. Producers were starting the work. Now they're essentially finished, and they don't know when they're going to get the funding back. And the producer engagement teams, such as the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, who are helping with that difficult onboarding, a lot of the other organizations have lost dozens of employees who are now unemployed. And in looking at applying for the next Advancing Markets for Producers initiative, we're now applying with a very bare bones team.
Okay, thank you. So this has definitely had an impact on our producers. I know for many, they don't have the cash flow to just continue on their own, and any investments made that have been not refunded at this particular point is a definite loss to their bottom line. And as you mentioned, employees fired are very hard to rehire in a tight labor market like the one that we are in. A question to the panel as a whole. There's been a lot of discussion about technical assistance and technical support as being critical. Mr. McLeland, your testimony also cites the importance of NRCS staff being able to help farmers access the technical assistance they need to be able to enroll in these conservation programs. What we do know is with the president's initial budget, he actually proposed eliminating completely CTA funding. We do know that yesterday there was some restoration of that particular funding in the appropriations bill, but we also know that CTA funding has decreased year after year after year. It's never enough. So to the panel, what impact is going to be the result of NRCS being slashed by the $800 million, staffing in the thousands lost to NRCS, and CTA funding actually decreasing, not increasing, in terms of rural farmers, underserved farmers being able to access this critical conservation funding that we are trying to provide? I don't know who wants to take it up.
Yeah, it all starts with technical assistance. The need for support that we understand from the producers and the growers out there, that's where it starts, from facilitation to getting into the right program to ensure that we're helping them address their goals and objectives. It's going to be very difficult to deliver incentive-based voluntary programs without conservation technical assistance. That it all builds off a solid foundation of conservation planning.
Thank you. Anyone else want to take the answer to that?
Watershed work is a long-term proposition, requires years of planning and work, and so any disruption of that flow does impact the outcome in terms of the ability to implement watershed program work.
We are similarly concerned about the damage this could do to the conservation delivery system. And I just note that not all farmers necessarily want to enter into a specific farm bill program. The conservation technical assistance allows them to get planning and the expertise they need. So it's yet another important avenue for really serving farmers and ranchers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Lamalfa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to join you in committee today. Key topic, very important to my home district in California as well, with over 500,000 acres of rice as well as other adaptable habitat for the betterment of waterfowl and conservation. So, as you know, in my real life, I am a rice grower in the Sacramento Valley, and my farm and many of my neighbors have utilized the EQIP program in the past, and have done at least a certain amount of effort to provide the habitats to all the many species we have in the flyway and so plentiful in the Sacramento Valley. In the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a provision included that will allow the Secretary to enter into EQIP contracts for up to 10 years for practices solely for the benefit of wildlife, including post-harvest flooding. It would help maintain seasonal wetlands for the waterfowl and migratory bird habitat. So, to my knowledge, USDA has still not carried out any contracts for longer than a few years, a couple years at a time. So I'm curious, with the provision that we worked on in 2018, why have not then been more longer, up to these 10-year contracts that the bill provided for, as depending to what level you're participating, the infrastructure, the effort you might do in shaping your lands, shaping irrigation systems, and other aspects of what you would do to enhance waterfowl and conservation does require a certain amount of effort, certain amount of investment in doing that. So for Mr. McLeland, what's your familiarity with EQIP putting out actual 10-year contracts? Again, because if I was going to invest in it, I would want to be able to know that I'm going to get a return, that the money I spend, the effort I make, is going to be more for than just a couple years, and maybe I don't get to be in that contract after that, and you're out that effort, which I think most people that participate at all probably wouldn't mind being in it for a longer period of time. It's not a hard thing. It's not like, say, in some cases, permanent easements, which shy a lot of people away. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's certainly good to have that option for sure. And each contract, each interaction with that producer, it's very tailored to their operation. So we work with them and are very sensitive to that. We haven't seen as many 10-year contracts as we probably would have expected. Generally, average around 5.
You have seen some tenure, though?
I have seen some, yes. And but
Do you
there
know what state or what region they would be in where you're seeing that happen?
Arkansas.
Arkansas?
Yeah. And we have definitely seen 5 years be the norm, the one to five, and that generally ends up being a function of the operation and the preference of the landowner.
So do you hear clamoring by growers for the 10-year contracts, or is it really a low demand situation? What do you think?
It has seemed like to be a more low demand situation.
Because we have run into anecdotes, at least on that, where we're wondering why NRCS is not allowing them or processing them or what have you as defined in the 2018 Farm Bill, to give that additional flexibility and long-term, depending to what level, to what stage you're practicing. I'd want to know if I'm making significant changes in my operation, that if it worked for me or a neighbor or whatever, that you would have that option. But I guess we need to get a little more direct input from folks that have sought these 10 years. Anything else you would have?
Again, we would advocate for as we would like to see as long a contract as we can get. So 10 years is good, but definitely need to take some look at the implementation side of it.
Well, it is very important we tailor these to
Yes.
individual needs, as you mentioned.
Yes.
At the top there. Well, heck, I know it's a positive thing, in that, but we'll have to get some more information together on the anecdotes. But is NRCS generally cooperative on doing them? Do they have any reason, maybe in the California region that you're aware of, that they're not putting them out internally?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, okay. Well, we'll follow up on that. So any thoughts you have, and anybody else on the panel, I ran out of time already on that, please send that along to my office if you wish. So thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's
Thank
time's
you.
expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, for
Thank you,
5
Mr.
minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. And thank you all to the witnesses who have come today. President Trump's 2026 budget proposal would cut funding that goes toward conservation, technical assistance at the USDA. And there's language that would cut the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service staff. And yesterday, the House Ag Appropriations Majority released a bill that aligns with that by slashing funding by 5% below fiscal year 2025 to the Natural Resources Conservation Services Conservation Operations. And so this is going to make it harder for farmers to get technical assistance as it relates to conservation. So for Mr. Fink and Mr. Leland, can you explain how slashing funding for operations and technical assistance programs affect the effectiveness of conservation programs, the future of farming, and the day-to-day experiences of farmers?
We're definitely concerned about potential cuts to conservation technical assistance. A lot of farmers, as I mentioned earlier, are not necessarily interested in entering contracts on farm bill programs, and so that is the funding that they access just to get that general technical assistance. And I think it's absolutely critical to recognize that for a lot of NRCS staff, these are folks, these are boots on the ground. These are people working directly with farmers who have trusted relationships. You cannot severely slash that funding without actually impacting the staffing component.
Okay, Mr. Fink?
Yeah, and I would agree. As I mentioned earlier, conservation planning starts with technical assistance, and these are long-term relationships that these conservation planners have with these producers, and it's a long-term investment. As Mr. Fink mentioned, some may not be looking for participation in a program. They just be looking for recommendations and advice on what they to address a need or a concern that they have, and so those are that's a very important piece of the foundation.
Thank you very much. So could you explain how this proposed cut might affect the intended outcomes of conservation efforts, such as lowering production costs for farmers and achieving better environmental results? Yes, sir, you can go right ahead.
Just given the importance of conservation technical assistance, it would be very difficult to ensure that the programs are implemented to the degree that they would be otherwise.
Okay, well, I agree with you. Well, let me move on. One of my main priorities on the broader committee is advocating for racial equity and justice in agricultural spaces, and it is the same for this subcommittee. Because when we help minority or black farmers, we help all farmers. And one of my signature bills, Justice for Black Farmers Act, has a few provisions related to conservation, such as using mandatory funding to support conservation technical assistance at the USDA and the Conservation Stewardship Program. And at a time when farmers are facing more climate-related pressures than ever, it's vital for Congress to give them the resources that they need to remain resilient and profitable. Hurricane Helene devastated Charlotte, which is where I represent, and the surrounding areas. Unfortunately, we've seen devastating impacts of natural disasters on farm country in the past few years. So for Ms. Nicole, is that Galassi?
Galassi.
Is that right? Galassi. Okay, thank you. So can you tell us about the role that USDA conservation programs like EQIP play in helping landowners recover from natural disasters?
Sure. EQIP has been really essential for recovering from natural disasters. EQIP funds things like, EQIP funds things like putting in, EQIP funds things that reduce erosion. You can put in windbreaks so that there's less erosion, and these are things that prepare you for when natural disasters come. We are seeing things like flooding. We're seeing things like drought. So reservoirs that EQIP funds, that allows us to capture the water when we need it in order to be prepared for when disasters like this happen. Reaching our historically underserved producers, these are the producers who normally don't have access to these programs. And so we need to build the trust for them to step into those NRCS offices and know that they're going to get the help they need with the technical assistance that needs to come with it so they can be successful.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Dr. Baird, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I think it's very appropriate that you mentioned the Dust Bowl and the Soil Conservation Service in your remarks because it's relevant to what we're talking about in this committee. And I wanted to share with you when I was a young kid on the farm in Indiana, we had one of the worst floods that I had ever seen, and it took out railroad trestles and filled, an example, a 5-gallon bucket of water in a very short period. We even had, back then, we fed hogs on platforms, wooden platforms, and put feeders on them when we saw pigs going down that flooded stream, still on the platform, and there wasn't anything you could do about it. But my point is the local farmers got together with the Soil Conservation Service and implemented the small watershed projects. And so when I get around to it, Dr. Siebert, I'm going to start with you, but the question goes to all of you. But those small watershed projects that went up the tributaries rather than a big main dam on a mainstream, and went up the tributaries, and those small dams functioned like the water tank on a toilet, in my opinion, and let it out slow. And we haven't had a flood in that area since that. I'm sorry, sir, but anyway. But we haven't had a flood in that stream since then. The only thing I see happening is that they've come to the end of their useful life, and there's some thought about maybe taking those out. My suggestion would be that we restore them and replenish them. But going on to my question, science, technology, and innovation, they're really central to the progression of American agriculture and have led the U.S. agricultural industry being the most reliable and efficient in the world. So how can we be sure to maintain clear eligibility requirements for these conservation programs that we're talking about, paving the way for implementation of new technologies when they come about, like precision agriculture and technologies or new land management practices? So then I'm going to go back, Dr. Siebert, if you would like to comment on my original thoughts, and then the rest of you on this precision agriculture, that would be appreciated.
To speak
I'd rather
across,
do that than be here, to tell you the truth, but anyway.
to take you across the country and let you tell that story. There are, in fact, 132 NRCS structures in your state at this point in time. I agree with you that in the majority of the cases, it's not take them out, it's rehabilitate them and continue to provide those benefits. Highway culverts, county road culverts, bridges, school bus routes have all grown accustomed to the protection those structures provide. And to take them out, in my opinion, would be an error, and folks would learn fairly quickly with the volatile weather we see around the country that something was doing a good job, even though it was a silent sentinel. Somebody didn't know it was there. They didn't know what the function of it was. It was providing the protection necessary to keep commerce going in that county and keep kids safe going to school.
Thank you. So anyone else, starting with Mr. Banning, anyone else have a comment in this regard, especially about precision agriculture?
Yes, sir. I would like to comment, and I appreciate the question. I got to thinking here when you went down that road, how much has changed in my 43-year farming career. And things just simply like GPS has enabled us to move to things like minimum tillage and nutrient management. And those are all conservation efforts as well. When you think about fertilization application rates that you can tailor as you go across your field and apply them at variable rates because then there is no excess. You don't overuse it, you don't underuse it. So precision ag has been just really, and I'll share this, it's been a little difficult to keep up when you get, I think my 8-year-old grandson will be able to help me here pretty quick on some of that stuff. But no, it's been, and it really ties into conservation because, like I said before, you can manage your nutrients, you can not overuse fuel. It's been a good thing.
Yeah, I would just comment quickly that I concur with Mr. Boning's comments here as well, and would also add that technology is providing opportunities for us in our space too to better utilize conservation as part of an on-farm operations where, in this case, wetlands may provide a suitable alternative and fit well within a farm operation, strengthening the bottom line and increasing profitability too. So precision is helping us identify those opportunities.
Thank you, and my time's up. I'm sorry for the last two, but we can talk later. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes an old colleague from the Science Committee, Mr. Sorensen of Illinois, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always fun to be able to talk about the intersection of agriculture and science. Today we are at a critical point where we must do more to conserve the fertility of our land by investing in soil resilience. Not doing so would risk the very foundation of our food and energy systems. Recent reports from the National Weather Service underscored a stark reality. Our land management choices have real and often dangerous consequences. On May 1st of 2023, multiple crashes occurred on Interstate 55 near Springfield, Illinois, in Congresswoman Budzinski's district. 37 people were seriously injured and 7 people died. The dust storm originated from freshly tilled and planted farm fields picked up and lofted by 40-mile-per-hour winds. But this wasn't a one-time deal. Less than a month ago, a dust storm in my district, southwest of Bloomington, Illinois, quickly tracked northeast on the heels of strong winds, causing zero visibility on roads and highways. And I, coming back from Washington, D.C. to my district, watched as the dust storm moved over O'Hare Airport, causing massive delays. Now, thankfully, no one died because of the quick action and the funding of the National Weather Service. Meteorologists like me, we call these dust storms, but more importantly, they're erosion events, the result of overly tilled, unhealthy soil, which creates dry, dusty earth that can easily be carried off by high wind. It's a similar tale to what happened in the Dust Bowl years of the Central Plains in the 1930s. It's not a visibility issue. It's not just a visibility issue. What we're seeing here is our nutrients go into the air and are gone. And we can prevent these disasters by ensuring that our farmers have the funding and the assistance that they need to implement smart ag, like no-till or cover crops that mitigate erosion and improve soil health over time. These practices not only ensure that our farmers can withstand stronger weather events, but also protect travelers in our communities. What happened in my district in Bloomington and downstate in Springfield should serve as a wake-up call, because this could easily happen next May or even in this fall if we're still in drought condition. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, plays a vital role in how we move forward, but it requires the funding and the staffing needed to meet the moment. Unfortunately, we're seeing is an administration that is hell-bent on making cuts to USDA's workforce, specifically within NRCS. With a massive $300 billion cut in food assistance on the horizon, it's hard to envision how this committee will pass a farm bill that sufficiently provides support through conservation programs like EQIP and CSP. Mr. Boehning, in March, West Texas experienced its own erosion event, turning the sky an eerie orange across the Permian Basin from El Paso to Dallas-Fort Worth. How can we best integrate smart agricultural practices into risk management planning to prevent future events?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Climate, we have climate change. We know that. We experience it. Some of that's brought on by some extreme drought that we've had in those areas. And these conservation practices that we've been talking about, since 10 a.m. this morning, are really the tool that we need to use as we go forward. I mean, you mentioned cover crops, you mentioned minimum tillage. Some places, not everything works exactly the same in every area. Right. I'll just use my area somewhat. Cover crops on our dryland acres, non-irrigated acres, are difficult because of limited rainfall. So we go back to doing as minimum tillage as we can, leaving as much residue on the surface as we can, and planting buffer zones, whether they be windbreaks, whether they be grass waterways, grass strips. So those are all things that we need to look at as we go forward, and we need to work on the funding for those, quite frankly, and we understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Banning. Dr. Siebert, my time is limited. I appreciate your soil and water conservation work. My focus in meteorology school was hydrology and stream flow management. Could you explain in the last 30 seconds that I have how important it is to lock the nutrients into the fields, keeping them out of the rivers, and more importantly, how Congress and the federal government should support the effort?
We can apply every conservation practice we know, and all it takes is one flood to take that away. So by controlling the flow of water across the land, we can lock things in place and have those remain where we have adequate production.
I love your idea of an all-of-the-above approach. Appreciate you all. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the full committee chairman of the committee, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, thank you both. You know, the one big beautiful bill passed by the House provided key investments for farmers and ranchers. This included necessary updates to the farm safety net, investments in livestock security measures, research, and trade promotion. It also rescinded unobligated IRA conservation funds and reinvested those dollars into the standing conservation programs. By doing so, we will have eliminated the climate sideboards and returned the funding to meet an important core principle, locally led conservation that benefits all farmers. Mr. Banning, how important are these investments for our agriculture producers?
That the simple answer there, Mr. Chairman, is of the utmost importance. Those, you know, we've talked about all morning here. These programs were successful, and Chairman Lucas mentioned it in his opening statements. Because they're flexible, they're voluntary, and they're locally led. So those things, those programs are what farmers have worked with and benefited from and over the years. So, you know, quite frankly, and it's not just the farming and ag community that benefit from it, it's our rural communities. It's all of those things that, so those investments are of the utmost importance to farmers and ranchers.
So isn't it true that in addition to just the fact that American agriculture can be defined as science, technology, and innovation, that coupled with this type of investment, and these programs really help to contribute to the fact that our farmers, ranchers, and foresters are the climate champions of the world. You know, with the amount of carbon they sequester, and the beauty of it in agriculture, when we sequester carbon, we manufacture topsoil, which means we grow things for the benefit of everyone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The Inflation Reduction Act required that funding provided by the law for conservation programs could only be used for climate-related practices, thereby restricting funding for many other practices otherwise eligible under the program. And some very credible individuals, including the NRCS chief during President Obama's administration, for one, have said it would be best if the sideboards were taken out so that the state technical committees and local groups can decide which practices work best for the natural resource concerns that they wish to address. Through the current reconciliation process, we are trying to reinvest those IRA unobligated conservation funding, as we've talked about in this hearing already, into the existing conservation programs to provide a permanent increase to the title's baseline. In doing so, we'd also remove those climate sideboards required by the IRA to allow for more local prioritization. I'll just open this up to all of our panelists. Do you agree that reducing or removing the climate sideboards would better allow it to be locally led process to be able to work and be able to use conservation practices that, you know, that may vary depending on, you know, where in the country the farmer's actually farming? I can think of many places where cover crops, if you put a cover crop in, it would suck every last bit of moisture out of the ground, and you wouldn't be able to grow a cash crop. And some places where a cover crop, it gets too cold too soon to be able to do planting like that. So I'll just open it up for anybody who would like to comment on that question.
I'll just go really quickly. So by opening it up, removing those sideboards, it goes back to the same things we've been talking about, being flexible, being locally led, and it's still voluntary. The climate smart practices will still be eligible, so it goes back to the core of how these programs work the best.
Yeah, I will second that to say at Ducks Unlimited, we are fully supportive of locally led, voluntary incentive-based conservation programs that are flexible, farmer first, and that certainly would be the case in this instance.
Very good.
As an organization, AFT is very supportive of climate-smart practices. They're essential to the profitability of farmers. But the number one thing that is limiting the ability to get these practices on the ground is total available funding. We support the transfer of this funding with or without those sideboards.
And any comments, I'll just finish with that, won't be a part of the Farm Bill, but it is a law today. USDA, the Biden administration just never really got it together. Programs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico for 5 minutes. Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. It can't be lost on us today that we're sitting here for a hearing titled Supporting Farmers, Strengthening Conservation, Sustaining Working Land, when just 3 weeks ago, some of my colleagues on this committee voted essentially to gut the Farm Bill and limit the chances of passing the historic bipartisan Farm Bill. So I think if we're going to talk about conservation, let's talk about conservation initiatives that are effective, that are based in science, and that are supported by farmers and ranchers on the ground, not the talking points from the White House. Because I am limited on time this morning, I'm going to make this easy and ask our panel some simple yes or no questions and shift the focus to some legislation that we can pass, apart or as part of a Farm Bill, hopefully. Mr. McClellan, you stated that you learned early on that agriculture and wildlife conservation were not mutually exclusive activities, which is something that I completely agree with. Do you still agree with this?
Yes.
Well, then I think you'd support my bipartisan bill, which is the Habitat Connectivity on Working Lands Act, which was written for this exact purpose and expands voluntary USDA programs to improve wildlife corridors on private working lands, including habitat for waterfowl and upland bird habitat. Thank you, Mr. McClellan.
Thank you.
Mr. Fink, do you agree that farmer-to-farmer education, which creates mentorship opportunities between experienced and new producers, is a valuable tool for farmers using federal dollars?
Yes, it is in fact one of our top Farm Bill priorities in conservation.
Well, thank you so much. That's the idea behind my bipartisan Farmer-to-Farmer Education Act, which creates mentorship opportunities between experienced and new producers, and I appreciate your support for this approach.
Thank you for your leadership on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Galassi, you said that the cattle industry is threatened daily by government overreach in part of your opening statement documents, and it's one of the impediments to conservation for ranchers. Is this correct?
Yes.
Well, I think you'll be happy to support or endorse my bipartisan bill. That's exactly what this does. The Ranching Without Red Tape Act aims to fix this issue by removing bureaucratic delays so that ranchers can make much-needed improvements on time without having to renegotiate their leases on federal land. Thank you, Ms. Galassi. Mr. Baining, in your testimony, you raised concerns about the closure of NRCS offices, which is something New Mexican farmers are also facing. Is this still an issue for farmers in Texas?
Yes, sir, it is somewhat, yes.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure that you'll also then hopefully support my legislation, which is the Honor Farmer Contracts Act, which stops the USDA from indiscriminately closing NRCS offices and requires the federal government to honor its already signed contracts with American farmers and ranchers. Thank you, Mr. Baining. I want to thank you all for your support of these bipartisan legislative priorities that I hope get to see the light of day both in this committee and the House Natural Resources Committee, because these are important priorities in which if we have the absence of an actual farm bill, we can't pass to help support farmers and ranchers across the country. And that's why I've introduced this full package of legislation designed to meet those goals. These are practical bills that are crafted with input from farmers and ranchers that strengthen conservation partnerships, expand wildlife corridors, and help producers sustain and grow their operations. I believe this is the kind of work that we should be focused on, both in our subcommittees and in the full committee, delivering real solutions that producers in New Mexico and across the country are asking for. Instead, and unfortunately, the priorities of this committee have advanced a bill that just cut SNAP and delayed or eliminated billions of dollars from farmers, families, and food retailers. So if we're serious about supporting farm country, we should act like it. I urge my colleagues to continue to support farmers and hold legislative hearings just like this one and markups on common sense bills like mine that I've laid out today, bills that actually solve our problems for our constituents and for farmland and for farmers and ranchers across the country. Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Messer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for sharing your testimonies in committee today. My son-in-law owned a farm together we bought a few years ago, which, by the way, the neighboring farmer that plants it uses no-till, so we try to address good soil practices. To address some drainage and erosion problems, we put in drain tile and had some earthen dams built. While it solved the erosion and runoff issues, it bore a hefty price tag, and it'll take us about 3 years from the cash rent to pay off the upgrades that we put on that property. On the committee, we say all the time, farmers are the best stewards of our land by investing in soil conservation, but investing in soil conservation practices is neither cheap or risk-free. The programs we're discussing here today help producers bridge the gap. Mr. Banning, in your testimony, you mentioned that technical service providers play a vital role in helping producers reach their conservation goals, especially as they work through the application process. One of the complaints I hear from farmers back home is the complexity of the program application. To give some context, could you share what a typical application looks like and why it can present a barrier to entry?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And as a quick aside, you mentioned drainage tile, and as a young farmer many years ago from South Texas, I had to figure out what drainage tile was, why it was important, because we don't have that issue in most of Texas, as you well know. There's really not a typical application process. That's really the deal. They vary immensely often from county to county and state to state for sure. There's a multitude of programs, as you well know. There's different environmental and conservation practices that work in those different areas. There's a ranking and scoring component of these applications. So I guess, not to disagree with your question, but I would just say that there's not a really typical application process, and that's, for us, that's why it ties back to the technical service providers, the local folks that know the areas, that know their county, that know their region, that can provide that expertise as our farmers and ranchers navigate these application processes.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. McClellan, would you like to comment on the application issue from the lens of the RCPP?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to start to say that the RCPP program has been effective. The 2014 version was very streamlined. It allowed us as technical service partners to provide support and get dollars in the hands of the producers very, very quickly, very expeditiously. In the process of the 2018 Farm Bill, again, the process is a little bit more lengthy in terms of which kind of doesn't make it as expeditious in terms of going through the application process, the planning process, and getting the resources to the producer. So a little bit of a longer time lag there with RCPP as it stands right now. And generally, that has to do with some administrative bottlenecks.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your insight, Mr. McClellan. The last thing I want to have is a stack of papers that separates private landowners from incredible opportunities for conservation. While we're on the topic of our CPP, I want to praise the success of the public-private investment model by encouraging skin in the game from private entities. These partnerships allow conservation efforts to be tailored, innovative, and follow a business-minded approach. Mr. McClellan, given your experience at Ducks Unlimited, can you share how programs that encourage private investment increase the reach and efficiency of these conservation programs?
Absolutely. No, producers bring resources to bear in these projects all the time, and these projects can be expensive, and so continued investment is very important. And so, from our standpoint, looking to maximize the outcomes as best we can, and primarily assuring that we achieve the producers' goals and objectives. Resources are provided. So the more partners involved, the additional investments that are made generally helps ensure quality and quality of the projects and maximizing the scale and scope of the projects.
Thank you very much. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now turns to the gentlelady from Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas, and thank you, Ranking Member Takuda. I'm really excited to get to serve on this subcommittee again. I represent a district in central and southern Illinois that issues around conservation and biotechnology are incredibly relevant, so it's great to be back. My district is the home to some of the most productive soil in the world. In the last census of agriculture, multiple counties in my district were in the top 15 corn and soybean producing counties in the entire country. And the farmers in my district are extremely driven to protect that valuable resource, especially as we see increased frequency of severe weather. Over the last few years, my district has seen dry enough drought conditions that we had a fatal dust storm along Interstate 55, as well as several tornadoes, severe flooding, and a derecho that hit the Springfield community as well. Severe weather events like these increase the risk of agricultural operations across the country and threaten long-term soil health. That's why USDA conservation programs are so important to my district. They can help reduce risk on the farm, protect soil and crops for our farmers, and improve water and air quality for all of us. With that in mind, I want to talk about how we can help farmers access the critical programs to reduce the risk of their operations. Just an example, in Illinois at the state level, we have the Cover Crops Premium Discount Program. That allows a $5 per acre premium discount on crop insurance for acres where cover crops are planted. This is a great program that many farmers have taken advantage of, but $5 an acre is certainly below the cost of adoption for cover crops. Mr. Fink, if I could ask you this question, I know that American Farmland Trust has been active in uplifting conservation practices as a part of risk management. In your opinion, how could the federal crop insurance program be updated to better reflect proven risk-reducing properties of conservation?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. I'll say first and foremost, we need to make sure that the crop insurance system is not conflicting with these good farming practices. There's been a lot of progress on that front. There's still probably more progress to be made. I think the other aspect is that when we look at the crop insurance system, if we're talking about creating additional incentives, it's something that has to be actuarially sound. And the good news is when we look at cover crop adoption, we've seen a lot of the research, it is reducing overall indemnity payments in the face of a lot of these extreme weather events. It's also reducing prevent planting payments. And so whatever we can do that looks at the actuarial soundness, builds the research to make that case, and ultimately our goal is to reward farmers for practices that are saving the public money and saving themselves money.
Great, thank you. And maybe just a follow-up question for any of the panelists. If you could share how conservation practices have reduced risk for you or members of your organization, I'd love to hear about that as well.
Some of the most important conservation practices that have been funded have been things like invasive species removal to reduce fire fuel loads and cutting fire breaks. This is protecting not only the ranch and the producer, but the community around the ranch, which makes them a good neighbor. It helps their business, and it's better for the planet.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just add that, from our standpoint, conservation programs like WRE, Wetland Reserve Easement, they add to the safety net. You don't know. In my home state of Missouri, we see flooding somewhat frequently, and so the opportunity to have a program like WRE that can do a wetland restoration project and and be available as an option to a producer, is part of risk management. It can be a solution there in terms of taking a loss on those acres. 3 out of 5 years. So it's really important, and it's decisions that we see get made, and we're thankful to have options for producers like that.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things that hasn't been mentioned this morning is the Emergency Watershed Protection Program that is a component of the Small Watershed Program, which, when administered, helps areas recover from the type of disasters that you're talking about, and it's an opportunity for NRCS to have a role in that recovery and provide that safety net to producers.
Thank you.
Just one thing quickly that hasn't been mentioned, and as far as conservation and the feral swine program that was initiated in the 2018 Farm Bill is very important to Texas, very important to much of the southern states. And as we go forward, and I know this committee and the full committee has probably already heard about the New World screwworm issue moving north, I think those types of programs are still going to be very, very important. Just wanted to get that mentioned.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back, and that is an understatement by the President of Texas Farm Bureau about the nature of screwworms and the curse called feral hogs, and that in eastern red cedar too. With that, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Bresnahan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member for holding this hearing. I am honored to represent Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District, home to the scenic Pocono Mountains and the Delaware and Susquehanna River watersheds. Interwoven throughout these national treasures, northeastern Pennsylvania is also home to over 1,000 family farms that help and feed to sustain our local communities. The continued success of this relationship between our working lands and our natural landscapes that surround them depends on a strong, common-sense conservation programs like the ones we are discussing today. Mr. McClelland, I appreciated hearing your testimony and dual perspective, not only as a representative of Ducks Unlimited, but also as someone who runs a cow-calf operation. I specifically want to hear more insights from your boots-on-the-ground perspective. Could you speak to how Ducks Unlimited works with the dairy and cattle industry when it comes to conserving land and supporting our farmers and ranchers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, too. For us, it really is multifaceted. We try our best to be technical assistance providers, boots on the ground. So working one-on-one with those producers to help them achieve their conservation goals and assess opportunities for conservation and operational efficiency. So starts there from a conservation planning standpoint, and we're grateful to get to work with those producers and very grateful for all that they do. To take a step further there, if there's opportunities for or a need for financial incentives to do conservation programs that will also increase their profitability, provide wildlife habitat and ecosystem services, we're going to help facilitate that process and bring that needed financial assistance to bear to get them again where they want to go. So that's our role, is to facilitate that process, to be a source of information and help guide them along the way as much as we can. And we're grateful for the opportunity to work in that space.
What are the NRCS programs that are most utilized by farmers and ranchers like yourself?
Yeah, as we've been discussing here today, it all starts with conservation technical assistance. It starts there with conservation planning, getting those initial site visits, and then the environmental quality incentives program is a program that has been very important to farmers and ranchers, so taking that a step further, prescribed grazing practices that provide infrastructure for increased profitability and utilization of pasture planting, native plantings, things like that have been very popular and are practices that we work with quite a bit, in addition to wetland restoration, the suite of wetland restoration practices where applicable.
I think it's important to point out that the direct help that conservation groups like Ducks Unlimited provide to our farmers. Just one last question. Can you expand on the technical assistance that Ducks Unlimited provides and how that partnership with NRCS actually works?
Absolutely. So we try our best to be a force multiplier for NRCS. We're grateful for the partnership with them. And in many cases, we're not in every state, but in states of need or high workload where our missions overlap, we are generally working right alongside NRCS, so we have the ability to do conservation planning and provide technical assistance, again, to help facilitate participation in conservation programs that address the needs of the producer. So again, I use that word force multiplier. We try to be added lift out there to help address the demand. Again, it's to be a service to the producer, and so we're there to provide our expertise and support as best we can, hand in hand with NRCS.
I appreciate that, and thank you to all the witnesses for giving up a day here to come in and testify. With that, I yield. Thanks.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Maryland, Mrs. McLean Delaney.
Thank you, Chair and Ranking Member, and thank you to all the panelists. I was listening in from my office, and I was very impressed by all the testimony, but I think I heard from all the stakeholders here that from, the Texas Farm Bureau to our cattle dairy industry to, American Farmland Trust and Ducks Unlimited, that we all need to make conservation programs more practical, accessible, modernized, and really there's adequate funding for conservation programs, and I wholeheartedly agree. I represent many farmers and farm country in Maryland, and I am the daughter of an Idaho potato farmer. And I understand the importance of responsible land stewardship. Our farmers and ranchers are not just producers, they're the best stewards of our land and resources. And programs promoting sustainable agriculture and conservation are vital for protecting our soil, water, and forests while keeping farms productive for many generations to come. Our committee, as you know, has a unique opportunity and responsibility to strengthen these programs and invest in the future of our land, but most importantly of our people. And for over 200 years, and the reason I actually joined this committee is that the House Agricultural Committee has worked to feed the nation and support rural America. And it's always done through bipartisan cooperation. And I really believe in bipartisanship. This year has been a little bit different. I'm a new freshman. And instead of uniting around farmers and conservation, unfortunately, ideology took a little bit of the front seat. I look forward to working across the aisle to strengthen USDA conservation programs and to support our farmers. But I believe we must acknowledge that this reconciliation bill needs to have some amendments so it does not leave these conservation practices behind. So Marylanders have been long stewards of conservation, and they've worked hard to sustain their lands. I've spoken to all my 5 farm bureaus and advocacy groups, and one example of farm stewardship that they mentioned is the Mid-Atlantic dairy farmers producing tangible results through climate smart change. That's a mouthful. It's a project that's supported by USDA Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, which we've been talking about. And this program really touches every corner of my district and tracks air quality, energy, and feedstock impacts. I'm just going to ask Mr. Boeing really quickly, in your testimony, you mentioned the need to simplify the RCPP application process. What barriers are producers facing in RCPP, and what should our committee consider when strengthening RCPP to help more farmers access these programs?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Could you repeat the last part of your question? Yes, about
what barriers are really facing in RCPP, and what should we as a committee really think about when strengthening this program to help more farmers access the program?
I'm not intricately familiar with I mean, I know what it is. We don't use it that much in our area, but from what I understand, it goes back to the same thing about having technical assistance, having folks, boots on the ground, so to speak, locally that can help producers navigate it. That's from what I understand.
And if any other panelists want to add in.
Yeah, I might just add to appreciate that question. Just to go back to our CPP on the whole, it's an effective program, but one limitation from a partner standpoint is just as written right now. It is a commitment to move that program forward, and there are some administrative barriers and costs that come with that. That ultimately kind of slows the process down. And so, we want to be expeditious and get these resources into the hands of the growers that need them. And so there are some provisions that have been proposed that I think would really make that process much faster and smoother.
And I'm happy, I'm going to claim a little bit of time back, but I'm going to give a little question and submit it, and so hopefully we can address that a little bit more. Another thing that was mentioned is one of my top concerns with the reconciliation bill is its impact on key farm bills. And one of them is that most critical programs from rural development interest to conservation are at risk, including programs like the Forest Land Owner Support Program, and as we just spoke about, the Emergency Watershed Recovery Program under RSCC. If funding is cut through the reconciliation package for programs like this, how do you see this impacting long-term efforts of conservation? And does it make sense, and what do you think is the delay of splintering the Farm Bill through this reconciliation process? I'm just really concerned. Any of you who can weigh in? Maybe something, yeah. It's, you know, I'm just concerned about, as we look at all of these programs and we are looking at reconciliation, that we leave some of these priorities behind that are so very important. I'm running out of time, but I will again submit this. I know it takes a little bit more to think about, but I know that 360 million acres of private working lands or forests are in the U.S., and I'm just very concerned about how our reconciliation process might not
Gentlelady's
address.
time has
back.
expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas, and also thank you to Ranking Member Takuda for holding this hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for taking time to be with us here today. I believe it is fitting to begin my remarks by praising my fellow committee members and Chairman Thompson for their work in passing our portion of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This historic legislation redirects nearly $14 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act to critical Farm Bill conservation programs, securing permanent baseline funding. We still have plenty of work to do to pass a complete Farm Bill, but the One Big Beautiful Bill Act provided significant and long overdue investments for our hardworking farmers in rural America. As of 2022, 98% of the over 10,500 farms in Tennessee's 6th Congressional District are family farms. Today, we have heard exceptional testimony advocating for working lands programs and urging Congress to refrain from allowing programs to retire productive and arable land. Mr. Baining, can you elaborate on the impact on family farms if working lands programs are not prioritized and if efforts to retire arable lands are not curbed?
Well, I think it'll force farmers out of business. You know, that's what it'll come down to, and it's very important that we keep moving forward with our working lands, and the lands that are most productive need to be treated that way. And then when we look at things like CRP, and we talked about doing the soil classification and those type of things, I think that's what it was intended for, and that's the route we need to go down.
Thank you. I agree on that. And by the way, thank you for a special thank you to you. My sister, Radonna, who worked in Farm Bureau in Tennessee for many years, says hello and wanted me to say that. So I know you have a proud tradition as a fourth-generation farmer, and it's good to have you here. And thank you for taking time from what no doubt is a busy schedule. Mr. Baining, staying with you, technical assistance accessibility from the NRCS for conservation programs has been an ongoing issue for years. The provisional changes in the Farm Food and National Security Act address these changes on many levels. Can you explain in detail the urgency in passing these changes and what we will experience if adjustments to technical assistance are not prioritized?
Well, thanks for the question, and it goes back to what we've been talking about from what I've mentioned and several other people have mentioned. We need those folks that are locally based and that technical assistant, because it's so much different. Environmental and conservation concerns, issues vary from state to state, and having that technical assistance there at a local level to help those producers navigate what's best for their operation, What's best, in South Texas may not be best in Tennessee. And I think we all know that. So having those technical service providers as boots on the ground locally, I think just enhances the programs, and it makes them much more effective all across the board.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Mr. Fink, between 2017 and 2022, Tennessee lost over 141,000 farming acres and nearly 6,900 farms. How can Congress utilize NRCS conservation programs to enhance environmental stewardship while also reversing the downward trend in production agriculture acres and operations?
One of the foremost priorities, of course, is the transfer of the IRA funding and providing more funding to the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. That'll enable more of those acres to remain in agriculture. And I'd emphasize that it's not just the easelands, it's that every farm that is lost makes another farm more vulnerable. So having one easement has a direct impact on other farms in the community. And then continuing the investment in these conservation practices. They are a part of what it means to keep farms viable. They are what makes the farms more resilient in the face of some of the weather that you've experienced. And I also want to congratulate your state for joining the ranks of so many other states and having one of those agricultural conservation easement programs.
Absolutely, and I'll just second that. Very proud to see the General Assembly advance a plan there to provide those conservation easements, and I think it's an important first step. Indeed, a first step in my view. We've got to do more to protect our farmland, and it's a delicate issue because we don't want to intrude upon people's rights to do with their property as they see fit, but we do need to safeguard farmland. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair sees no one else seeking recognition to ask questions. Before we adjourn today, I would like to invite the ranking member to share any closing comments she might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to our panel of witnesses for a robust and very, I believe, productive conversation. Some of the things that we definitely heard was that increasing investments in conservation programs are something we can all 100% agree on. We cannot fund enough, especially given that the demand often and, quite frankly, outpaces the resources that we're able to put toward it. But just as important as the money is the technical assistance and support, especially for farmers in rural, underserved communities, just like my home state of Hawaii. We need to make sure those farmers, ranchers, and producers have access to that kind of support and technical assistance so that they can actually have access to these resources, and increasing, not slashing or even steadily decreasing support for programs like the Conservation Technical Assistance, CTA program is absolutely critical. This not only increases access, but it makes sure that the support and solutions are local. And that's something that we have also heard that's being very important today. We've heard a lot of talk today about flexibility, but I believe another important word is stability. It's very important that we understand that farmers, ranchers, and producers need to be able to rely on something, and oftentimes that's the NRCS staff. And so when we take a look at the closures in offices, the reduction in staffing and funding, the impact will be felt across the board, from our small farmers to our large producers as well. And in the case of Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities, now called the AMP initiative, you have 14,000 farmers and ranchers and $3 billion in awarded funding left in limbo. And for many farmers, they've been left with receipts in hand. Too many have had to fire employees, abandon projects that would have been lifelines for their operations. And as Rep. Vasquez talked about with his Honor Farmers Contract Act, farmers and ranchers don't want us to be flexible with their funds and deliverables once it's been awarded and a contract signed. Stability is being true to our word, and that is something we also need to live up to in this building. And so I truly thank you for this robust conversation, and I look forward to future ones as well. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself for much time as might consume for a closing set of comments. It is a pleasure, my friends, to be back here and have the honor of chairing the committee with jurisdiction over not just biotechnology and research, but conservation. I have lived my entire tenure in Congress, and now being the longest serving member of the Ag Committee, focused on conservation issues. How to preserve the soil, the water, the air. How to make sure that these wonderful assets that were given to us by our predecessors, how we make sure that those assets pass on to our children, our great-grandchildren, so that this nation can enjoy the things that we have. We started out in this great nation, as all legislative bodies do, with glorious intentions. The Homestead Act, a classic example of an effort to give every individual who wanted to work hard enough the ability to settle on 160 acres of land, to create their own legacy, their own future, and to feed the nation and the world. A legacy that was designed for the Midwest, which didn't work quite so well in different soil and different climate types. My home county had 14,000 people in the 1930 census, as I've told many of you. And after the bad economic decisions of Congress and the federal government and the Federal Reserve System and the Great Depression, and so happens the Dust Bowl and the drought of the 1930s, my home county's now made it back to 3,400 people. 3,400 people. But the things that we have done since then, policy-wise, have made a huge difference. Whether it's the upstream flood control dams, or the educational practices on conservation and efficiently using our resources, or the money we've invested on ag research to make precision agriculture possible. This committee, this subcommittee, while we have a variety of opinions and perspectives about how to implement those policies, have historically worked together. Our battles in passing farm bills, while we disagree sometimes by region or crop or perspective, we come together in this subcommittee and this committee, and we fight our battles on the floor with those who may not understand the issues that we've discussed in our hearings, and in our field trips, and in our work together, and from our constituents. I simply challenge all my friends. Congress is changing. This committee is changing. But the principles of how the Ag Committee works, whether it's conservation or the other practices, still have to stand. We have to come together to move as a common group when we get to the Farm Bill. And whether it's fleshing out what's not done in budget reconciliation, the big beautiful bill, or whatever the process may be, we have to come together and work as a team and build on the efforts of all of our predecessors, of all parties, persuasions, and regions. With that, thank you, witnesses, for an outstanding set of testimony, a willingness to answer in the most precise and straightforward way you possibly can a variety of questions from us. This discussion will continue as the work of this subcommittee and this body continues. But never forget our common goal for the good of the American people. And that, this subcommittee is adjourned. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written questions from witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Conservation, Research, and Biotechnology is adjourned.